In a small rural town called Willowbrook, surrounded by vast cornfields, there was a cornfield that stood out from the rest. This cornfield was known to all local residents as the Cornfield of Silence. During the day, it looked like an ordinary place, with rows of corn waving in the hot sun. However, as night fell, the place came to life with a sinister aura, as if it hid dark secrets deep within its endless ranks. There were many scary stories associated with the Cornfield of Silence. Locals told rumors of strange apparitions, whispers in the wind, and unexplained sounds echoing across the countryside. Some claimed to have seen pale figures moving among the corn plants, while others said they had heard chilling laughter amid the nighttime silence. Mark, a fearless young man from Willowbrook, grew up hearing these scary stories and has always felt an uncontrollable curiosity for the unknown. He believed the truth was out there, beyond the limits of what ordinary people were willing to explore. It was a full moon night when he decided it was time to unravel the mystery of the Cornfield of Silence. Dressed in dark clothes and carrying a flashlight, Mark set out in search of it. The moon cast its silver light over the cornfield, creating a mysterious and sinister scene. As he approached the cornfield, Mark could feel the silence wrap around him like a blanket. The sounds of the city were gone, replaced by the calm, oppressive silence of night. As he walked through the first few rows of corn, he heard the first whispers. They were indistinct murmurs, soft voices that seemed to call him, almost whispering his name. He marked these as illusions of the imagination, a manifestation of his own excitement and nervousness. As he ventured deeper into the cornfield, the whispers seemed to intensify. They echoed in his mind, as if the corn plants had life and secrets to share. Mark could feel that he was being watched, and the feeling that something was following him did not leave him. He continued, lighting the path in front of him with his flashlight. But as it progressed, the whispers turned into something more. Now the voices seemed to whisper words, some unintelligible, others seemed to tell dark stories that echoed in his mind. The movements in the shadows of the corn plants could no longer be ignored. Visible, indistinct marks seemed to dodge the light of his flashlight. At first, he dismissed them as nocturnal animals that inhabited the cornfield. But as the whispers continued and the figures in the shadows became more defined, Mark began to question his own sanity. It was then that he saw something that made him stop abruptly. A pale figure, partially obscured by the darkness, stood a short distance away. Mark pressed the flashlight, shining it into the figure's face. It was a woman in a white dress with empty eyes and disheveled hair. Her lips were sewn shut, as if she had been horribly silenced. The woman didn't say a word, but her gaze seemed to penetrate Mark's soul. He felt a chill run down his spine as he watched her. The woman turned and disappeared into the shadows of the cornfield, leaving him stunned. He didn't know whether he should follow or run away, but curiosity impelled him to continue his search and unravel the mystery of the Cornfield of Silence. Mark hesitated for a moment after the frightening appearance of the woman in the white dress, but his determination to unravel the mystery of the Cornfield of Silence compelled him to continue. He followed the pale figure's footsteps, his flashlight cutting through the darkness as he advanced deeper into the rows of corn. The whispers that had once been just indistinct murmurs were now clearly voices, albeit in a language he didn't recognize. They seemed to whisper dark secrets and tell stories that invaded Mark's mind, making him more restless with each step. As he went further, he saw more pale figures among the corn plants. They watched him with empty eyes, silent as specters in the night. Mark began to wonder who these figures were and why they were in the cornfield. His movements were quick and stealthy, like shadows dodging the light of his flashlight. Every time he tried to get closer, they retreated, disappearing into the depths of the cornfield. Mark felt like he was on a tireless search, as if the figures wanted to keep him away. Fear began to rise within him, but he maintained his determination. He needed to get to the bottom of this enigma, no matter what obstacles he encountered. The whispers continued, now becoming a chorus of whispering voices, as if the cornfield itself was speaking to him. Mark began to notice that the figures were forming a circle around him. They seemed to be leading him somewhere specific, and his curiosity urged him to continue. He felt like he was about to discover something important, something that would reveal the mystery of the Cornfield of Silence. As he advanced deeper into the circle of figures, the whispers became a mesmerizing song. It was a strange, haunting melody, in a language he couldn't understand. The song echoed in his mind, making his legs move almost automatically. He was being pulled toward the center of the circle, where something extraordinary awaited him. The song was like a spell, hypnotizing him and taking away his control over his own movements. He could not resist the supernatural force that drew him into the darkness of the cornfield. Finally, he arrived at what appeared to be the epicenter of the circle. An ancient, gnarled tree, its roots exposed like claws, stood imposingly before him. On the trunk of the tree, a mysterious symbol was carved that Mark couldn't identify. It appeared to be an ancient form of writing, but nothing he had ever seen before. The pale figures, now positioned around the tree, began to sing the song with more intensity. The melody was mesmerizing, and Mark felt like he was losing control over his own actions. He found himself walking towards the tree, unable to resist the supernatural force pulling him. As he got closer, he could see that the symbol carved into the tree glowed a reddish hue. The air around him seemed electrified, and Mark felt like he was about to discover the secret of the Cornfield of Silence. However, what he would find there would exceed his worst expectations, plunging him into an endless nightmare. Mark continued walking towards the tree carved with the mysterious symbol, the chants of the pale figures echoing in his ears. The sound was mesmerizing, enveloping him like a spell he could not escape. The symbol on the tree seemed to pulse with an ominous energy, and the air around it became denser and more oppressive with every step he took. As he approached the tree trunk, Mark's flashlight illuminated the pale figures surrounding him. Their empty eyes stared at him, and he could feel that they were trying to tell him something, a macabre story that was about to be revealed. Mark finally reached the trunk of the tree, where the symbol was carved in all its complexity. It looked like an ancient and unknown script, as if it were a language that had been forgotten by time. He reached out to touch the symbol, feeling a tingling sensation in his fingertips. Before his fingers could touch the carving, the pale figures began to sing louder and more frantically. The melody surrounded them, enveloping Mark in a chilling cacophony of sounds. He felt like he was losing control over his own mind, as if he was being sucked into an endless nightmare. At that moment, the tree began to move, its gnarled branches reaching toward Mark like hungry claws. He tried to step back, but his feet felt rooted to the ground. The tree continued to reach out, reaching for him, and Mark felt as if he were being pulled into it. The pain was sharp and searing, as if his flesh was being torn by the tree's claws. He screamed, but his voice was lost in the cacophony of sounds surrounding him. The pale figures danced around him, their movements becoming increasingly frantic and frightening. The tree continued to pull him into it, and Mark felt himself disappearing into the darkness. Terrifying visions flooded his mind, images of unspeakable horrors and endless nightmares. He couldn't distinguish reality from illusion, and his mind was in shambles. Finally, Mark felt like he was diving into a bottomless abyss. His consciousness faded, and he was lost in darkness. The macabre song, the whispers of the shadows, and the never-ending nightmare completely consumed him. The Cornfield of Silence had revealed its most sinister secret, a parallel reality where lost souls wandered eternally, trapped in an endless cycle of horror. Mark became a part of this nightmare, a victim of the sinister mystery surrounding the cornfield. His story became another of the horror stories that circulated in the city, a warning to all those who dared to challenge the unknown. The macabre truth of the Cornfield of Silence remained hidden in the shadows, waiting for the next victim brave enough to venture into its domain. Mark found himself in an endless nightmare, lost in a maze of darkness and torment. His mind was fragmented, and he wandered aimlessly, unable to discern between reality and illusion. The Cornfield of Silence had swallowed his sanity, making him part of the very nightmare he had once tried to unravel. The pale figures surrounding him were now his only company, their voices echoing in his mind like a distant echo. He could see their empty, lifeless faces, their eyes staring at him as if they were witnessing eternal suffering. Mark tried to communicate with them, but his words were lost in the cacophony of whispers that surrounded him. Time seemed to stretch and distort in this dark place, where the night never ended. Mark wandered restlessly, devoid of sleep and food. The Cornfield of Silence was a kingdom where time lost all meaning, a place where suffering stretched into eternity. Sometimes he saw glimpses of his past life, of friends and family he had left behind. But these were just illusions, distorted by the darkness of the cornfield. He was alone, lost in his own torment, doomed to wander forever in the shadows. Mark tried to find a way out, looking for some clue that would take him back to reality. But the Cornfield of Silence was relentless, a prison of nightmares that allowed no escape. He screamed and begged and cried, but his words were just another echo in the void. Eventually, he stopped fighting. Resignation took hold of him, and he surrendered to his dark fate. He became a pale figure among pale figures, a whispering voice among whispers. He had merged with the Cornfield of Silence, becoming part of its eternal nightmare. Meanwhile, in the small town of Willowbrook, stories about the Cornfield of Silence continued to circulate. Locals whispered about strange apparitions, whispers in the wind, and unexplained sounds that echoed in the night. Mark had become a legend, a frightening story told to warn those who dared to challenge the unknown. The bravest continued to venture into the cornfield, eager to unravel the mystery surrounding the place. But like Mark before them, they soon became lost in the shadows and became part of the endless nightmare of the Cornfield of Silence. The ominous truth of the cornfield remained hidden in the depths, a secret that only those who dared enter could discover. The town of Willowbrook continued to be a place where horror lurked in the shadows, where horror stories came true, and the Cornfield of Silence maintained its relentless hold on those who dared defy its darkness.